Friction as a force cannot be classified. By definition, it is the resistance to motion of one object moving relative to another. So we classify it based on the action that is experiencing the resistance. We have two broad types: static friction and kinetic friction. Static friction acts on all the objects when they are resting on a surface. For example, a car parked on a hill. The brakes apply static friction to the wheel hubs and the wheel holds fast to the ground because of static friction. Bottle at the edge of table. If the wind force is sufficient enough, it overcomes the static friction and falls off the table. Static friction is when an object is held stationary against another object and neither moves with respect to each other. A certain minimum tangential force is required to move it. When an object starts to move with respect to another object or surface, there exists a friction between the moving body and the surface. This is called kinetic friction. It exists when there is a relative motion between the objects. In kinetic friction, we have different types. They are sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. Let us start with sliding friction. Sliding friction acts on objects when they are sliding over a surface. Sliding friction is weaker than static friction. That is why it's easier to slide a furniture over the floor after it starts moving than it is to get it to moving in the first place. Sliding friction can be very useful. For example, we use sliding friction to write with pencil. The pencil lead slides easily over the paper, but there is just enough friction between the pencil and paper to leave a mark. Few other examples we can relate to are a sledge sliding across snow or ice, a kid sliding down a slide, a block being slid across the floor, the bottom of the glass being pushed across the table, a sliding glass door. These are some of the daily life examples of sliding friction. Without this necessary amount of friction, these actions wouldn't exist. Now, moving on to the next type, the rolling friction. Rolling friction acts on objects when they are rolling over a surface. Rolling friction is much weaker than sliding friction or static friction. This explains why most forms of ground transportation use wheels, including bicycles, cars, roller skates, scooters, and skateboards. Ball bearings are another use of rolling friction. They let parts of a wheel or other machine roll rather than slide. The term rolling friction refers to the resistance created by an object rolling across a surface. Examples of rolling friction are: a car will eventually come to a stop if just allowed to roll, as the friction between the road and the wheels causes friction that causes the vehicle to stop. A soccer ball kicked across a grassy field will slow more quickly than one kicked across a smooth hard surface because the rolling friction is far greater on the field. A heavy truck will have greater rolling friction than a small car because the truck has a heavier load bearing down on the wheel and therefore causing greater rolling friction. So this is rolling friction. The next type is the fluid friction. A fluid is a substance that can flow and take the shape of its container. Fluid includes liquid and gases. If you have ever tried to swim in the pool, you would have experienced fluid friction. The water opposes your push. Now, another example is a skydiver. He is falling towards the earth with a parachute. The resistance of the air against the parachute slows his descent. The faster or larger a moving object is, the greater is the fluid friction resisting its motion. That is why there is a greater air resistance against the parachute than the skydiver's body. A dynamic fluid friction is much lower in magnitude compared to the sliding friction of solids. For this reasons, some fluids are used as lubricants in between surfaces of sliding or rotating objects. The contact surfaces then become two sets of surfaces: solid to fluid contact and fluid to solid contact. Because the fluid friction is less in each set, the overall sliding friction gets reduced. So here we are at the end of this video on types of friction. To sum up, we learnt about the types of friction like static and dynamic friction, and then learnt about the subtypes of kinetic frictions such as sliding friction, rolling friction, and fluid friction. In the next video, we'll look at few important terms and terminologies associated with friction. See you there.